Mike Romano, known as Italian Mike, was the only outsider to ever break the unbreakable code of the Mexican Mafia. In a world where loyalty is bought with blood and betrayal can mean death, Mike walked a path no one thought possible and survived where most would have fallen. Mike Romano was not like the other kids in his neighborhood. Growing up in a quiet Italian-American enclave in Los Angeles, he seemed destined for a normal life. Most of his peers followed the traditional paths, working in family businesses, going to college, or chasing simple blue-collar dreams. But Mike was different. From an early age, he was drawn to the streets, the hidden corners of the city where power was measured in respect, fear, and influence rather than degrees or money. His friends often joked that he had the eyes of someone who could see the world differently. But no one could have predicted the life he would carve out for himself. Mike's fascination with danger began small. He watched gang members from a distance, observing their movements, their loyalty, and the unspoken codes that governed their world. While most saw gangs as a threat, Mike saw an opportunity, a way to prove himself, to be more than just another Italian kid in a quiet neighborhood. His charm made him approachable, but it was his daring that truly set him apart. People underestimated him at first, dismissing him as someone who wouldn't last in the streets. This miscalculation would become his greatest advantage. The streets tested him early. He took risks that would have terrified others, running errands for low-level crews and delivering messages across gang territories. Each task was a lesson, a chance to understand the rules and the unspoken hierarchies that dictated life in the underground. He learned quickly that loyalty was everything and betrayal could mean death. Yet, even in the midst of danger, Mike showed a calculated calmness that drew attention. He didn't just survive. He observed, absorbed, and adapted. As he grew older, his reputation began to form. People whispered about the Italian kid who walked fearlessly among dangerous men twice his size. They noted his sharp instincts, his ability to read situations, and the way he never hesitated when action was required. Mike wasn't seeking fame, but he couldn't avoid it. The combination of his ethnicity and audacity made him an anomaly. In a world ruled by tradition and bloodlines, he was an outsider looking in, yet he moved with the confidence of someone who belonged. Family life at home offered little guidance. Mike's parents had dreams for him, dreams of stability and safety, but he was restless. His mind was always calculating the next step, imagining a life beyond the ordinary, beyond the predictable. He learned early that respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned, often at great cost. And in the streets, cost meant much more than money. It meant risking everything for recognition, even life itself. It was during these formative years that the first whispers of his future began. Older gang members started noticing him, intrigued by the audacity and intelligence hidden behind his youthful face. He moved carefully, never overstepping too soon, but always close enough to be seen. In time, these small observations turned into opportunities. Doors that were closed to others began to open for him. Mike Romano, the Italian kid from a quiet Los Angeles neighborhood, was beginning a journey into a world where few outsiders survived, and even fewer thrived. By the time he was in his late teens, it was clear that Mike was no ordinary street kid. He was building a foundation for something bigger, something dangerous. And although he didn't yet know it, this path would lead him into the heart of one of the most ruthless criminal organizations in America, a place where his Italian heritage would make him an anomaly, yet his fearlessness would earn him a legend status. The streets had claimed many, but Mike was different. He was ready. Mike's first encounter with the Mexican Mafia was neither planned nor expected. At the time, he was just another street operative, running small errands and delivering packages for local crews. The streets of Los Angeles were a dangerous chessboard, and Mike was learning to move several steps ahead. One afternoon, a simple delivery would thrust him into a world he had only observed from the shadows. He was sent to deliver a package to a group known for their ties to the Mexican Mafia, a gang notorious for its ruthless control over the city's prisons and drug trade. Mike had heard the stories, the whispers of violence, loyalty, and the unyielding code that governed them, but he had never imagined he would face them so directly. The meeting spot was a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The walls were covered in graffiti, and the air smelled of gasoline and damp concrete. Mike entered cautiously, carrying the package as instructed. Inside, several men lounged with an intimidating ease, their eyes sharp and assessing. Mike immediately felt the weight of their scrutiny. These were men who could detect weakness instantly, men who lived by rules he had only begun to understand. One wrong move could have ended him before he even spoke. But Mike's calm demeanor, his confidence in his every step, caught their attention. He delivered the package without hesitation, and something about the way he handled himself left a mark on the group. It was a small moment, but it was enough. The men started to notice him, not as an outsider to dismiss, but as someone who could potentially be molded into something useful. They observed how he didn't flinch when provoked, and how he carried himself like someone who belonged in that dangerous world. Mike, aware of the delicate balance, knew he had to navigate this carefully. Over the next weeks, he continued to cross paths with members of the gang. Each encounter was a test, subtle yet deadly in its implications. He delivered messages, ran errands, and observed the inner workings of the organization. Every action was calculated, every gesture watched. Then came the first real test of loyalty. A deal went wrong, one that involved rival gangs and a shipment that disappeared. Mike, though tangentially involved, was scrutinized as if he had orchestrated the failure. The tension was suffocating. Men around him exchanged glances, and he could feel the invisible knife of suspicion hovering over his head. But he remained composed, analyzing every expression, every tone of voice, knowing that any sign of fear could cost him his life. The group watched him closely, waiting to see if he would crack. Instead, Mike responded with intelligence and audacity, showing that he could handle pressure where others might crumble by the end of that week. Something remarkable had happened. The Mexican Mafia, known for their insularity and distrust of outsiders, had begun to acknowledge him. They didn't yet trust him fully, but they recognized his potential. Mike had walked through the door of a world that few non-Hispanics had ever entered and survived the initial storm. The experience left him exhilarated but cautious. He understood that respect in this world was hard-won, fragile, and could vanish in an instant. Every step forward would be fraught with danger, but Mike had proven one critical fact. He belonged here, at least enough to be noticed. This encounter marked the turning point in his life. What had started as a simple delivery had transformed into an initiation into a world far darker and more complex than anything he had imagined. It was the first door into a life of high stakes, loyalty, and constant peril, a life that would test every ounce of his courage and cunning. Mike Romano was no longer just a street kid. He was now dancing on the edge of a criminal empire, where survival depended on wit, fearlessness, and the ability to navigate a world that accepted very few outsiders. Mike quickly realized that surviving in the Mexican Mafia was one thing, but earning respect was an entirely different battle. Being noticed as a non-Hispanic outsider had drawn attention, but attention alone could be deadly if it wasn't backed by capability. The gang was ruthless in testing loyalty and toughness, and Mike had no choice but to prove himself repeatedly. His first real challenge came in the form of assignments that most members refused, tasks that were dangerous, humiliating, or both. He was asked to retrieve stolen shipments, enforce debts, and confront rival crews in neighborhoods where one wrong move could mean death. While others hesitated, Mike approached each mission with a methodical audacity. His reputation for fearlessness began to grow. Members whispered about the Italian kid who handled situations with a calm that bordered on cold. Mike didn't just follow orders. He observed, learned, and improvised. If a rival gang tried to trap him, he would anticipate their moves and turn the situation in his favor. If an errand went wrong, he found solutions where others would panic. Every success, every narrow escape, was a brick in the foundation of his credibility. The Mexican Mafia was built on loyalty and fear, and Mike learned to balance the two like a master craftsman. Physical toughness alone wasn't enough. He also needed cunning. The gang tested his intelligence with schemes and setups designed to see if he could outthink them. In one instance, he was sent to negotiate the release of a member held by a rival faction. Most would have relied on brute force, but Mike relied on observation and manipulation, using the rival gang's rivalries to secure freedom without violence. This act didn't just impress the leadership, it astonished them. They began to see him as someone who could do more than follow orders. He could lead, strategize, and survive in ways that few others could. Isolation became a constant part of his life. Even as respect grew, he was always reminded that he was different. Other members occasionally mocked his heritage, whispered doubts, or subtly tested his loyalty. Mike learned to use this isolation to his advantage. Being an outsider made him unpredictable, and in the Mexican Mafia, unpredictability was a weapon. He learned to strike at moments no one expected, to make decisions that caught even seasoned members off guard. Over time, this combination of fearlessness, intelligence, and calculated audacity made him indispensable. The turning point came when Mike was entrusted with leading a high-risk operation, a series of coordinated drug pickups in rival-controlled territories. Success meant enormous gain for the gang. Failure meant violent retribution. Mike planned every step, anticipating ambushes, mapping escape routes, and coordinating with a network of informants. The operation succeeded flawlessly, cementing his place in the organization. Members who had doubted him now regarded him with cautious admiration, while leadership saw him as a rare asset. By the end of this period, Mike Romano was no longer just the Italian outsider. He was a respected operative in a world that rarely welcomed outsiders. He had earned a reputation for completing impossible tasks, surviving deadly tests, and thinking like no other member. Yet, with every achievement came new dangers, new rivals, and higher stakes. In the Mexican Mafia, trust was fragile, and enemies were never far. Mike understood that his rise had only just begun, and that to maintain his status, he would have to continue risking everything, facing challenges that would push him to the very edge of survival. Mike's rise in the Mexican Mafia was not just about surviving. It was about seizing opportunities that others overlooked. By now, he had proven his toughness and intelligence, earning respect from the members around him. But Mike understood that survival alone would never make him powerful. To climb the ranks, he needed strategy, cunning, and an ability to manipulate the delicate web of loyalties and rivalries within the gang. Unlike most members, he didn't rely solely on brute force. He studied alliances, observed tensions, and identified weak points he could exploit to his advantage. His outsider status, once a source of suspicion, became a secret weapon. Mike began to take on more complex operations. He coordinated drug shipments across multiple territories, managed distribution networks, and ensured that conflicts with rival gangs were resolved in ways that benefited the Mexican Mafia. While many saw him as just another enforcer, Mike was quietly reshaping the gang's operations to his liking. He identified inefficiencies, eliminated risks, and often completed missions that others deemed impossible. His ability to plan and execute under pressure earned him a reputation as someone who could be trusted with high-stakes assignments. But with power came envy. Other members, threatened by his rapid rise, began to plot against him. Whispers circulated, questioning whether an outsider should hold so much influence. Mike knew that suspicion in the Mexican Mafia could quickly turn deadly. To survive, he learned to balance fear with loyalty, showing just enough respect to placate his rivals while asserting authority where it mattered. He became a master of subtle intimidation, letting his reputation do the work before taking direct action. Each calculated move strengthened his position and reminded others that he was not to be underestimated. The turning point came during a violent turf war with a rival gang. Many members hesitated, unsure how to proceed, but Mike stepped forward. He organized a coordinated strike, using intelligence he had gathered about the rivals' movements. The operation was executed flawlessly, resulting in a decisive victory that expanded the Mexican Mafia's control and enriched its members. Mike's leadership during the conflict earned him not just respect, but a degree of fear. People began to realize that his vision extended beyond personal survival. He was shaping the gang's future. Outside observers might have seen chaos, but Mike thrived in it. He understood that in the Mexican Mafia, power was not only about strength or loyalty, it was about perception. He cultivated an image of unpredictability, making allies uncertain of his next move and rivals wary of challenging him. His Italian heritage, once a point of isolation, added to this mystique. He was different, unbound by the traditions that constrained others, yet he had mastered their rules better than many who had been born into the gang. By the end of this chapter in his life, Mike Romano was no longer just a member of the Mexican Mafia. He was a strategist, a rising force whose influence could not be ignored. He had transformed from an outsider into a central figure, capable of shaping decisions and directing outcomes in a world where one mistake could be fatal. Yet, even as he ascended, danger lurked around every corner. Envy, betrayal, and violence were constant threats, and the higher he climbed, the sharper the knives that awaited him. Mike knew that his rise had only just begun, and to maintain it, he would have to navigate a world filled with enemies, both seen and unseen, using every ounce of cunning and courage he possessed. Mike's arrest was inevitable. Years of high-stakes operations, risky moves, and relentless ambition had finally caught up with him. The charges were severe drug trafficking, weapons violations, and multiple counts linked to violent incidents. But prison, rather than ending his story, became the next arena where he would prove his power. Unlike most who saw incarceration as a defeat, Mike recognized it as an opportunity. The Mexican Mafia controlled much of the prison system, and influence inside the walls could translate to power on the streets. He entered with caution, knowing that every move would be scrutinized by both allies and enemies. The first days were a test. Prison was a different world, one with rules even more rigid and brutal than those outside. Mike observed everything, listening to conversations, noting tensions, and identifying alliances. He quickly understood that survival depended not just on strength, but on perception and timing. He learned which inmates commanded respect, which guards could be influenced, and which situations required patience over action. Every glance, every word, every hesitation had meaning, and Mike had the instincts to read them all. Soon, he began to assert his presence. Mike used his reputation from the streets to gain credibility with fellow inmates. His daring outside, his strategic mind, and his proven loyalty to the Mexican Mafia earned him cautious admiration. But respect alone was not enough. He had to demonstrate usefulness. He became a go-between, negotiating disputes, ensuring operations ran smoothly, and quietly managing conflicts before they escalated into violence. Mike had learned that influence in prison was built as much on diplomacy as on fear. Those who underestimated him quickly discovered that he could manipulate outcomes without ever raising a hand. Mike also understood the importance of psychological control. He studied rival factions, noting their strengths, weaknesses, and insecurities. He used this information to play groups against each other subtly, creating situations where he appeared indispensable. Every favor he granted, every alliance he brokered, reinforced his growing dominance. Guards, too, became part of the equation. Mike learned how to earn their cautious respect, how to appear cooperative while quietly maneuvering behind the scenes. By the time he had settled into the routine of prison life, it was clear that Mike Romano was no ordinary inmate. Isolation became both a tool and a challenge. While many saw him as an outsider, he used his difference to his advantage, projecting unpredictability. Other inmates, unsure of his limits or intentions, treated him with deference. He was careful not to appear invincible, knowing that arrogance could provoke deadly envy. Mike balanced visibility with discretion, allowing his influence to grow quietly but steadily. By the end of his first year, Mike had established himself as a key figure within the prison's hierarchy. His ability to navigate danger, manage people, and maintain control over operations earned him a reputation that extended beyond the walls. Even rivals recognized that he was a force to be reckoned with. Prison, a place that could have destroyed him, instead became a proving ground. Mike Romano had transformed the confinement meant to break him into a stage where his influence and cunning shone, solidifying his place in the Mexican Mafia and laying the foundation for the power he would wield outside. Mike's rise within the Mexican Mafia had earned him admiration, but it had also painted a target on his back. In a world where loyalty was prized above all, betrayal was the deadliest weapon. The first sign of the betrayal came in the form of an ambush. Mike was called to oversee a routine drug pickup in a neighborhood, controlled by a rival faction. It should have been simple, but the moment he stepped into the alley, he noticed the traps set around him. Cars blocking exits, shadows shifting in the corners, the unmistakable tension of men ready to strike. Mike's instincts kicked in instantly. He avoided a volley of gunfire, ducking behind crates and using the chaos to escape. While he survived, the incident made it clear someone close had betrayed him. Trust, he realized, was now a dangerous liability. Mike began methodically tracing the leak. He scrutinized behavior, watched movements, and pieced together the puzzle. Every ally became a potential suspect, every conversation a potential trap. The tension grew unbearable. A single mistake could mean death. He couldn't rely solely on fear or brute force. This betrayal required intelligence, patience, and subtlety. He began setting counter-traps, feeding false information to test reactions, and watching closely for inconsistencies. Slowly, the picture became clear, and the name of the traitor revealed itself. Confronting the betrayal, however, required careful planning. Mike knew that direct confrontation could trigger a violent backlash from others who were unknowingly complicit. He had to act decisively, yet discreetly. He orchestrated a series of moves designed to isolate the traitor, discredit his influence, and reclaim control over operations without alerting the wider gang. Every decision was calculated, every action measured. The process tested Mike's patience and nerves in ways that no street battle ever had. The betrayal culminated in a violent showdown, a tense confrontation that forced Mike to face the very real risk of death. He relied on both his instincts and his network of loyal allies, carefully executing a plan that neutralized the traitor without triggering a full-scale internal war. When it was over, Mike had regained his footing, but the experience left him changed. He understood the fragility of loyalty, the thin line between power and vulnerability. Every ally was now seen through a lens of suspicion, every step forward measured against the possibility of deception. The chapter of betrayal became a turning point in Mike's life. While most would have crumbled under the pressure of such treachery, Mike emerged stronger, sharper, and more cautious. The near-death experiences reinforced his reputation for fearlessness, but they also revealed the high cost of trust in a world where loyalty could vanish overnight. Mike Romano had survived the ultimate test, not just of strength, but of cunning, resilience, and the ability to turn betrayal into a stepping stone for even greater power. In the Mexican Mafia, survival was earned, and Mike had proven once again that he was willing to do whatever it took to maintain his place at the top. Mike had survived betrayal, ambushes, and tests of loyalty, but the Mexican Mafia was a world where power was never secure. Even after proving himself, he knew the real challenge was maintaining influence while navigating a web of enemies and allies, each with hidden agendas. His unique position as the only Italian in the organization became both a liability and an advantage. While many still distrusted him, his outsider status allowed him to move in ways no one else could. He was unpredictable, unbound by the traditions that dictated others' actions. And this unpredictability became his greatest weapon. Rival factions within the gang often tried to undermine him. They spread rumors, challenged his authority, and set traps designed to test his patience and judgment. Most would have reacted with aggression, but Mike approached these challenges with calculated precision. He studied each faction, observing their rivalries and weaknesses, and found ways to exploit them without direct confrontation. By turning their conflicts to his advantage, he could assert control while minimizing personal risk. Each maneuver was a lesson in strategy, proving that power in the Mexican Mafia was as much about intellect as it was about fear. Mike's ability to manipulate perception further solidified his influence. Members and rivals alike began to treat him as a force they could neither predict nor control. He cultivated an image of omnipresence, ensuring that even the slightest action seemed deliberate and far-reaching. Simple movements showing up in unexpected places, making decisive interventions in disputes, or appearing to favor one faction over another, kept everyone off balance. This constant uncertainty made him both respected and feared, a rare combination in an organization built on rigid loyalty and tradition. His most daring move came when a high-profile conflict erupted between two factions vying for control of a lucrative territory. Many seasoned members hesitated, wary of the potential fallout. Mike seized the opportunity. He acted as a mediator, subtly directing each side toward outcomes that ultimately strengthened his influence. By ensuring that neither faction could fully dominate, he positioned himself as an indispensable figure, the one who could balance power, control disputes, and maintain order. His outsider perspective, combined with his street-honed intelligence, allowed him to achieve what few insiders could: a decisive influence over the gang's internal dynamics without firing a single bullet. Mike's status became legendary. Stories of his audacity and cunning spread through the gang, both inside prisons and on the streets. Members spoke of the Italian outsider who had survived where many insiders had failed, who could outthink opponents and anticipate threats. Even those who resented him acknowledged his unmatched skill in navigating the dangerous and often deadly politics of the Mexican Mafia. He had transformed from an anomaly into a figure whose influence could not be ignored. Yet Mike never let himself become complacent. He knew that power was fleeting, that respect could turn to envy, and that alliances could dissolve overnight. Every action was measured, every step forward calculated. His outsider-esque edge, the very thing that had once set him apart, remained the source of his survival and dominance. Mike Romano had become more than a member of the Mexican Mafia. He had become a legend, a symbol of fear, cunning, and survival in a world where only the sharpest and boldest thrived. Mike Romano's journey through the Mexican Mafia had transformed him into a figure few could comprehend. From the streets of Los Angeles to the most dangerous corners of prison, he had navigated a world that was not built for outsiders. His rise was extraordinary, a blend of courage, intelligence, and audacity, but it came with costs that were impossible to ignore. Friends had been lost, betrayals endured, and enemies multiplied at every turn. The life he had chosen, or that had chosen him, was one of constant vigilance, where every move carried the weight of potential death. Despite the danger, Mike's influence endured. He had carved a place for himself in the Mexican Mafia that no one else could challenge. Other members, even those who resented his heritage, recognized his unparalleled ability to survive and dominate. He had become a strategist, a leader, and a symbol of fear and respect. Rival factions learned to tread carefully, knowing that Mike's reach extended into territories, both inside and outside prison walls. His name alone carried weight, opening doors and closing threats with equal efficiency. The outsider had become indispensable, a rare anomaly in an organization bound by blood and tradition. Yet power brought isolation. Mike could trust very few people, and even those closest to him were always under scrutiny. Every ally had to earn their place. Every relationship was measured against loyalty and usefulness. He had learned the hard way that betrayal could appear from the most unexpected directions, and that complacency could be fatal. While many saw him as untouchable, the truth was that his survival required constant calculation, careful observation, and a readiness to act decisively at a moment's notice. The pressures of maintaining power weighed heavily, and solitude became a companion as constant as the threats surrounding him. The street legend of Italian Mike spread beyond the gang, entering whispers among law enforcement, rival organizations, and media outlets. His story fascinated many because it defied expectations. A non-Hispanic who had not only survived, but thrived in one of the deadliest gangs in America. His life became a cautionary tale and a symbol of ambition, proving that audacity and intelligence could sometimes outweigh tradition and loyalty. Yet behind the legend, the reality was far more complex. Every victory had been earned through risk, every reputation forged in fear, and every day of survival a reminder of the fragile nature of power. In the final years of his rise, Mike began reflecting on the paradox of his existence. He had achieved the extraordinary, yet the very achievements that elevated him also ensured he would never have a normal life. The Mexican Mafia had given him influence, respect, and fear, but it had also chained him to a world of violence and uncertainty. Every step forward had cost him something: friends, peace of mind, freedom. His legacy would endure, but it was inseparable from the sacrifices and dangers that had defined his journey. Mike Romano's story ended not with a single dramatic act, but as a testament to the extraordinary lengths one man could go to survive, dominate, and redefine the rules of a world that had never intended to accept him. He had become more than a member of the Mexican Mafia. He had become a legend, a symbol of the outsider who conquered the impossible. His life left a warning and an awe-inspiring example, proving that ambition, cunning, and fearlessness could make a single person unforgettable, even in a world designed to crush those who dared to rise above it.